Okay, I think we should go ahead and get started. Good evening. My name is Daniel Malone. I'm the DESC Executive Director, and I'd like to start the meeting by thanking you for coming, and I'll describe our format for the meeting this evening. So the next slide has the meeting agenda. You'll be hearing from several different DESC presenters this evening, explaining our plans, and then we have reserved a significant amount of time to get your feedback and your questions. So what we're going to do is I'll start with some introductory remarks and an overview of the services that we provide at DESC. Then DESC's Housing Director, Noah Fay, will explain the housing model that we're planning for this location and how we interact with the surrounding community and respond to some other questions that have come up in recent weeks. After Noah, our Facilities and Property Development Director, Sandra Nielsen, will describe the building that we're planning for this site in Burien. And then our Deputy Director, Stephen Bullock, will facilitate our transition into smaller discussion groups. We know from past experience that there will likely be a range of issues that people are interested in, and so as to give as many people as possible the opportunity to identify their questions and feedback, we won't try to do that in the full room. We've arranged to have several different breakouts, so there can be of a more reasonable size. We are going to record both the full meeting and the breakout sessions, and we will share the recordings with the city of Burien as they have requested from us. Then when we're done with the breakout rooms, we'll come back to the big Zoom room for a wrap up and a discussion about how we'll continue providing feedback, providing answers to the questions and how we can get additional feedback from folks. So we had a meeting very much like this one for neighbors on February 23rd, so a month ago. We shared the same information in that meeting that we're going to share tonight. So if you were there with us then, this will feel pretty repetitive, although we have some additional information. We took some of the questions and comments from the people who had attended that previous meeting, and we summarized them into some FAQs and provided written responses to those and posted that on our website. So we have produced that additional information since the previous meeting that's been available to folks. And then we've received some additional questions still that we're going to be trying to address in the content that we provide to you here tonight. So, okay. So that's how the meeting is set up to go here. Before I begin with this overview of DESC, who we are and what we do, I just want to start by acknowledging a couple of things. First off is that I recognize there is great frustration about the issue of homelessness among people in the public, from kind of all quarters. I'm one of them that's very frustrated about the issue of homelessness. Many people are upset about just knowing how many people are suffering in the streets, and many people are upset about a whole variety of behaviors that they see from people who appear to be experiencing homelessness. Our work here, the reason we're proposing this development is because we believe we can help improve on the current situation, which is unacceptable for everybody. I'll explain in just a bit you'll hear in just a bit how supportive housing makes a big difference in the lives of people who get it and how it helps the community overall. Additionally, we are aware that there's a lot of unmet need among people experiencing homelessness in Burien already. To date, all of the supportive housing, nearly all the supportive housing that exists in all of King County is in Seattle. It's been developed by DESC and a number of other organizations, but with a couple of exceptions, virtually all of it is in Seattle. And we know that not all people who need supportive housing and would benefit from it actually even want to live in Seattle or are in Seattle to begin with. We believe that supportive housing is something that should be made available to people who need it across King County, and it should be matched with where people are and where people want to be. And so our intent here is to build this in a place where people need it, and for people who are already in Burien. Another thing I wanted to acknowledge is that we know that people hear stories and can have concerns about various kinds of programs aimed at alleviating homelessness, including about programs that DESC operates, and people have concerns about what those programs will do to neighborhoods and property values. And I just want to be really clear here from the outset to clear up any misconceptions that may have developed, that our plan is to create permanent housing for people at this site in Burien, which means a relatively low amount of turnover. This is not a shelter program. It's not a day center program for people. It is people who sign leases and will be there with the expectation of remaining long-term. And in keeping with that, DESC expects to be a good neighbor for decades to come. We're developing this property with the intent of running it and maintaining it in good operation for 50 years, actually. And so in the spirit of neighborliness, one of the most important things we can commit to is being responsive to our neighbors. One thing we cannot guarantee is that there will never be issues with us or the people that we serve. We try to minimize any kinds of issues, but we can guarantee that we will follow up on any issues that arise and do our best to resolve them. We have a track record of doing this kind of permanent housing at 14 other locations. And with regard to things like property values, they have not been affected. In fact, there has been a tremendous amount of developed nearby other properties that we have developed after we have put our buildings into operation. So those were just a few things that I wanted to say at the outset. And now I'd like to turn to just describing what we do as an organization, so you can understand the scope of DESC here. So next slide, please. DESC exists to basically meet the needs of people with disabilities who experience long-term homelessness. So here are the array of things that we do at DESC. So we were founded 42 almost years ago to provide a survival service overnight to people on the street, with a particular emphasis on people with mental illness and people with substance use disorder. Since then, DESC has expanded its work to still focus on serving that same population group, but to do it by providing a variety of services that were largely unavailable, at least in an effective way, to the people that we were concerned about. And so here's what those services are. First of all, behavioral health services. DESC is licensed to provide mental health treatment and substance use disorder treatment. That's the sort of the range of things that go into behavioral, the moniker of behavioral health. It includes mental health and substance use disorder. We have a variety of services within our behavioral health programs that include outpatient mental health, outpatient substance use disorder treatment, and then a variety of specialty services as well. That includes crisis intervention services that we do across King County. DESC is contracted by King County to operate a program known as the Crisis Solutions Center, which receives referrals principally from first responder units, law enforcement, fire, EMS units primarily across King County when they have encountered somebody in some kind of crisis, psychiatric crisis or other behavioral health crisis. And the first responders are aiming to find a solution that is different than taking the person to jail or taking the person to the hospital. or in some cases simply leaving them there in that state of crisis. And so the program that DESC operates is able to provide relief in those situations. It includes a facility in Seattle where people can go and stay for limited periods of time and get psychiatric support and medication and food and rest and other planning work. But it also includes a mobile component, which is known as the Mobile Crisis Team. This is a team that operates 24/7 and dispatches out of several different locations around King County, and responds to requests from first responder units to essentially come to a place where they've encountered somebody and take over providing intervention and service to that person they're dealing with. And so in that regard, we are very active all across King County, including in Burien. The outpatient behavioral health services I described, however, are really inside Seattle. We also do a significant amount of outreach across several different programs. The most biggest ones of our outreach programs are a psychiatric street outreach program on the streets of Seattle that's aimed at creating a relationship and assisting people get out of homelessness who have serious untreated mental illness and are on the streets. There is a component we do also that is focused on outreaching to people who have opioid use disorder or stimulant use disorder. People who use methamphetamine, for example, is another component of our outreach work. We have an employment program that's focused on the needs of people with disabilities, behavioral health disabilities, to get work in the community. And we still operate survival services, what we sometimes refer to as emergency shelter, but temporary accommodations for people experiencing homelessness to be able to stay and get some support and, safety from the streets and so forth. So the original part of what we were founded to do as an organization is still active, and we have a little over 500 beds of that kind of service happening currently. So all of those things that I described sort of give you the picture of our organization overall in many of our activities, except for the services that we are going to tell you about more in depth here tonight, about what we're proposing for this location in Burien, and that is permanent supportive housing. We have 1,200 permanent supportive housing units in buildings that we own and operate in buildings across Seattle. We also do some additional supportive housing work in what we call a scattered site configuration in other apartment buildings in and outside of Seattle. But mainly it's in these 14 buildings that we own and operate. And so all of the other work that we do at DESC helps inform our experience and expertise in serving people. But the bulk of those services are things that we will continue to do as we're currently doing them. It's the last bullet here that we're here to talk about tonight, which is the supportive housing work that we do in Seattle. So I'd like to take just a moment to diverge from the planned agenda to invite a couple of neighbors and stakeholders to talk, because we have been engaging with some local business leaders, namely Andrea from the Southside Chamber and Deborah from Discover Burien, about some of our plans, and hearing questions from them and knowing that they're hearing from business owners. And tonight's meeting was spurred by their requests that we set up a meeting to engage with and address the questions of business owners. I realize the meeting has been announced more broadly than that, but the genesis of it was to was to be an opportunity for business owners to engage with us on this. And so anyway, in the course of talking with Deborah and Andrea, we suggested to them that if they wanted to, they could look at where we do some of this work in other locations. And I know that they ended up going around to see at least one DESC supportive housing facility that's in South Seattle, and has a lot of similarities, in my opinion, to what we're proposing for Burien, because it's a couple of blocks off of the commercial areas of the Columbia City neighborhood and the Hillman City neighborhood in Seattle, which are similar in kind of scale and feel, I think, to downtown Burien, and similar distance to the site that we're talking about here from downtown Burien. And so we thought that would be a good comparison site. And I know that they went and took a look and talked to some people in the neighborhood, and even found our project manager who gave them a tour of the building and everything. So I'd just like to pause for a moment and ask Andrea and Deborah to unmute and offer their reflections on what they were able to see so far.
Yeah, thank you so much, Daniel. I just want to say, welcome, and I hope everyone is healthy and safe and doing what they need to do to stay that way. We really appreciate DESC hosting this, and for all of my fellow community members for joining in. As Daniel mentioned, my name is Andrea Ray, and I have the pleasure to serve as the President CEO at the Chamber, your regional chamber. We have served the community of Burien since the 60s and are passionate about supporting our business community. As an independent nonprofit service organization, we focus on economic development and community engagement because we know how important working together is. We were founded on the belief that we are better and stronger together, and we live out that principle every day. Our mission is to create success for our members, advance our region, and maintain a strong economic environment. And we do that through support, service, and advocacy, and by connecting our businesses to our community and convening opportunities like this for us to learn from each other and build relationships. The Chamber continuously strives to keep all of our members updated and informed, and it is truly in that spirit of collaboration and information sharing that we wanted to partner with Discover Burien and DESC to bring this opportunity specifically to our Burien business community today to learn more about the supportive housing project in downtown Burien. We hope this opportunity will help the business community better understand the project, again, address a few of the specific concerns that we've been hearing directly from the business community that we've passed on to Daniel and his team, and we hope that they plan to review and answer tonight. As Daniel mentioned, we did tour one DESC project inside and then did tours outside around the community in South Seattle, specifically Rainier Valley and that Columbia City location. And yes, happy to share more specifically about what those experiences were. I would like to first let Deborah from Discover Burien introduce herself, and then we can share our experience.
Thank you, Andrea. I'm Deborah George with Discover Burien, and thank you everyone for attending tonight. I think Andrea said pretty much everything I wanted to say and more so, but what I'm really looking forward to have you guys do is to chime in, have your comments, write them in the chat box as we go. Daniel will answer them. Hopefully as we go or in the breakout sessions or afterwards. So this meeting is set up to hear the feedback of the community, of the business community, and the residents in the community. So we look forward to hearing your feedback. Thank you, Andrea.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And again, if anyone would like to, talk to us, more specifically about, what our experience was, we're happy to share that. Specifically, it was the Rainier House where we toured the inside of the facility and spoke directly to the adjacent businesses that are, within, a stone's throw location of the site. Everyone that we talked to didn't realize that there was a supportive housing project, as their neighbor. So that was the first thing. There were some businesses that did see an increased activity for aid. So, an increase of, medical service, requests that came through, which I think Daniel mentioned, with how vulnerable the population is that they serve. So again, some of the specific concerns directly coming from the business community that we've heard are, why this location specifically? There are other properties further down the street where we wouldn't need to displace businesses. Could we talk a little bit about a specific location? Also talking about getting a little bit more data in terms of, how the eviction process goes, how the intake process goes, wanting to ensure that, we truly are helping to lift people experiencing homelessness in Burien up with some supportive housing projects. So again, really appreciate everybody being here tonight. As Deborah said, this is a great opportunity to get your comments, registered and passed on, to city staff and the council. And just again, really appreciate the opportunity to be here, and happy to provide, more insight or more feedback. Daniel, I know this is your event.
Excuse me. Thank you so much, Andrea and Deborah, for joining here and really, being the inspiration for us doing this meeting, and for your reconnaissance work in the Rainier Valley, and just openness to talking to people and answering questions. So that's what we're here for, is to make sure people understand what we're proposing and talking about, and seeing what kinds of feedback and questions there are. So so that's the intro that I had here. To get into the meat of things now, our housing director, Noah Fay, is going to take it on and tell you about the model of supportive housing, what it is and how we do it. And then he'll pass it on to other colleagues from there. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much, Daniel and Andrea and Deborah. Thank you so much for helping convene tonight, and everyone else who decided to join our call. I really appreciate it. I'm hoping to have the opportunity to give you a bit of an overview of permanent supportive housing as our model. And then hopefully, it sounds like some of the questions that people had raised, I think we're going to be able to speak to in this presentation tonight. So I think we're on the same page. So I look forward to this discussion with you all. I want to start by just highlighting what our fundamental philosophy is. DESC uses a principle called housing first when we talk about developing housing for people. And it's based foundationally in that we see housing as a basic human right. That's really our foundational component to all of our work. From there, we believe, and years of research into our programming that also uses a housing first approach, have shown that people are far more likely to live healthier lives when they're given a safe place to live. An older model for offering housing was to require people to first address all their challenges. Well, we do something different, where we instead offer people a stable place to live first, which in turn serves as a foundation for people to get better and live a happier, healthier life. Next, it's really important to highlight who permanent supportive housing is for, and it's not meant for just anybody. It's specifically intentionally designed for people who need a place to live, who have some of the greatest challenges and the greatest needs. So a typical DESC supportive housing tenant is living with severe and chronic disabilities, is amongst the most vulnerable people experiencing homelessness in the community, an average age in the late 50s, often having lived on the streets for years and in many cases, tragically, decades, which is important to highlight that this intervention is really designed for people with some of the absolute greatest needs. It's also critical to just highlight what this actually looks like. So on one hand, this is really housing, which is a really important piece to highlight. So as Daniel said earlier, this is not a shelter, and it sometimes gets confused as such when we're talking about it. But I think as you'll see as we go further, the more we talk about it, the more you get to see it. It obviously is not. It's an apartment building with on-site staff working around the clock to support the needs of the tenants living in the program. And so when I say apartment building, I really mean apartment building. People are expected to sign a lease. People are expected to pay rent. People, just like any apartment leaseholder, is expected to comply with their lease. And if they do so, they can live there as long as they want, and are expected to maintain their own independent studio apartment. What makes this housing different is that it's on DSC to bring services to our tenants. So unlike your average apartment building, DSC brings supports and case management on site to support the needs of our tenants. These supports are tasked with doing whatever it takes to help people with the flexible and voluntary services they need to stay housed and connect with other community resources. So what you're seeing here on the screen are some examples of some of the types of things that our on-site supports do to help people stay housed and thrive and connect with the community. And this is really foundationally key to why this model works so well. It's these assertive services that are provided to every tenant that really is the glue. So our staff actively seeks out our tenants to support them in a whole variety of ways. We have on-site 24/7 staff called residential counselors who support tenants with day-to-day concerns. We also have on-site housing case managers who work with tenants to access treatment, connect with primary care, comply with their lease. The point really here is that while otherwise a traditional apartment building, it is a heavily staffed, service-rich environment. If we can move to the next slide, please. So there's a number of reasons why we do that, but a key one we do that is so we can manage the program around the clock and ensure we're being a good neighbor in the community. A few examples you'll see here are that our front doors are always locked. Like most apartment buildings, unless someone is a tenant of the building, people are not free to simply come and go and enter as they please. There are rules that limit and govern visitors to the building, which is our way of effectively managing a common concern that the building will serve as a beacon to draw people into services. And I want to be clear, aside from the occasional visitor and staff that work in the program, the only people who will be coming and going are the people who live there, the tenants of the building itself. If we can move to the next slide, please. So I want to talk more about being a good neighbor. So I'm going to spend some time on this piece here because this is something that's really important to us and I know is probably the meat of what we want to talk about tonight. So our commitment to being a good neighbor runs deep at DSC. We take it very seriously. We often get questions, which I expect we will tonight, about what neighbors can expect. And as Daniel mentioned, over the years, we've developed systems that we think work really well to live up to our commitment to being a good neighbor. There's kind of three big buckets for that. First, as I mentioned on the first slide, tenants are expected to sign a lease, and in that lease, it contains a good neighbor agreement. This spells out expectations for how tenants are expected to engage in the neighborhood. It contains basic expectations that one would expect really of any neighbor, and we've been using it for many years, and we find that really almost no tenants have any issues with signing it. In fact, many are surprised we ask them to sign because the conditions are so obvious that they would expect to sign them, or they expect to live up to them in any community they lived. Now, to be clear, there are some tenants who occasionally struggle with these expectations. And one of the things we do is we point to this good neighbor agreement to help address these issues. If the issues don't subside, we have the teeth to use it as a lease enforcement issue. But in my experience, I've worked at DSC for going on my 18th year now. This rarely happens, as we have great success for addressing these issues quickly before they rise to a lease enforcement issue. I know one question that's come up is how often are people asked to leave or evicted? I looked into this looking back basically the last 12 months to give some hard data. I can tell you it's very rare. We have nearly 1,200 units of permanent supportive housing, and over the last 12 months, 14 people were asked to leave or evicted. And while highlighting how rare these cases are, would also want to highlight that even when that happens, our commitment to people is that we still don't give up on them. And in all but 2 of these 14 instances were people able to be either rehoused or resheltered with the DESC. I also want to call out that I know there's been increased attention on DSC's Red Line in Renton, which is a shelter program we stood up in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think it's important to highlight some of the key differences between what we're proposing in Burien and what we're doing in Renton. So first, the urgency of the pandemic necessitated a move without the advanced conversations like we're having tonight, which created a dynamic where we didn't have a chance to build deep community connections before we started our program. Since we've moved in, we've been able to backtrack and try to build some of those relationships and have regular convenings of community meetings with the local Renton Chamber of Commerce with the idea of addressing issues and impacts that we're having on the surrounding neighborhood in real time. So what we've found is that when there have been issues, We've been able to quickly address them and since have developed what I think is a quite collaborative relationship with our neighbors in Renton since. And given that our proposed project here in Burien isn't set to open for at least another 2 years, we have lots of time to build those same sorts of relationships before we even open, which I'm looking forward to. Also, one key dramatic distinction between the two programs is that the Rent and Run Lion is a shelter for 235 people rather than permanent housing. Daniel touched on this piece, and it's a critical distinction and one that's often lost on people when we have these conversations. The difference being that the guests at the Red Lion don't have any long-term plans to remain there, whereas the tenants at DSC Burien will have a permanent place to live and value it as such. I want to talk about 911 calls, which I know is something people like to ask about, and rightly so. And it's true, there definitely have been more 911 calls coming from the Renton Red Lion as a shelter than when it was a market rate hotel. But I think it's also important to talk about what these are for. And these are rarely for public safety crises and are more likely related to healthcare emergencies or non-emergent events that have been reported by our guests. We work closely with police departments, both in Renton and anywhere, to drive these calls down. And we have found this to be really effective over the years. We had, prior to the COVID pandemic, we had a large emergency shelter in downtown Seattle. And that also had a large volume of 911 calls. But again, the key distinction here is these are dramatically different facilities with a different sort of scope and a different sort of nature to them day in, day out. We track 911 calls not just at our shelter programs, but at other apartment buildings, other permanent supportive housing apartment buildings too. We've done some reviewing of the data, and in reviewing 911 call data at the community level in neighborhoods where we have apartment buildings like the DSC Burien proposal, there's a decrease in calls to 911, not an increase after we've moved into the neighborhoods. I think for context setting and for what neighbors can expect, it's about average at our apartment buildings, our PSH apartment buildings, to have about 6 to 10 calls to 911 a month. And by far, the most common reason for this is a tenant medical emergency. There are things we do to avoid relying on 911, of course, for these sorts of things, like connecting people to primary care, working with a 24/7 nurse consulting line to avoid using 911 unnecessarily. However, that said, much like nursing homes or other skilled facilities where people have a high level of need, the medical fragility of a DSC tenant sometimes means they need emergent medical care. Second, by staffing the building 24/7, our staff really serve as an extra set of eyes and ears for the community. We really do welcome calls at all hours of the day about concerns in the neighborhood. We found most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, we're able to respond in real time to investigate what's going on in the neighborhood. Often cases, what we found is it's situations that are unrelated to DSC tenants, but we may still be able to address the moment in real time. And sometimes it does involve our tenants. We're able to quickly address the issue before things escalate any further. And then lastly, the most important piece that I think is critical to highlight here, which touches on a lot of subjects, is that we fundamentally expect people to comply with their lease. People living at DSC permanent supportive housing projects are tenants, and we expect them to comply with the lease that we ask them to sign. And most do, with very few issues. However, there are some people who do struggle, usually as a result of the underlying challenges that they're living with. In these cases, we work to address those issues without needing to pursue eviction, as returning somebody to the street not only flies in the face of our fundamental mission, it doesn't serve the community or the person well. And we have a really great success of doing this, as our eviction rate I talked about earlier. Also, just our overall retention rate usually is in the high 90 percentile. This topic around how we manage issues often comes up as it relates to drug use, and I think it's important to talk about briefly here. Drug use is not simply permitted in our programs. I want to be clear about that, but we'll also want to be clear about that some of our tenants, sometimes many of our tenants, are living with substance use challenges, and many can struggle with this. Our approach is to take an honest, direct strategy with our tenants about this topic. Much like substance use in the broader community, many addictions play out in private and we work to actively connect people with treatment. Some people have substance use issues that can impact the broader community, and we can and do treat these as lease enforcement issues as they arrive. Throughout all our work with about people living with substance use issues, we use an approach that is known as harm reduction. This is a practical approach that acknowledges that risky behavior like drug use exists in our world. Instead of demanding that risky behavior simply cease, often to limited effect, harm reduction attempts to reduce the dangers and impacts associated with risky behavior. This intervention has been around for some time and can take many forms. Most well known is provision of clean needles and access to condoms. I found in my time working at DSC, there's a really deep-seated societal belief that the only path to recovery from substance use is immediate and total abstinence and or a tough love approach. And clearly this approach works for some people, but just as clearly it doesn't work for others. And for that group, we can see worsening harm if we don't find other interventions. This means other approaches are required if we want to meet the treatment needs of our population and the broader community. A common concern is that harm reduction produces ill effect for the people that we serve. In order to answer that question, we've long partnered with the University of Washington to study the actual effectiveness of our program. And in doing so, we have not seen any support at all for the idea that our harm reduction approach leads to a worsening of substance use outcomes. And in fact, in study after study, we have seen just the exact opposite, that harm reduction is associated with reduced use, reduced harm, and at the community level, a reduced need for emergency services, including 911 calls. Next slide, please. Thank you. So does this program, the service model work? Well, there really is no intervention in homelessness that has been more well studied than permanent supportive housing. And study after study after study have shown that this model improves lives and reduces the demand for local emergency services. Whether it's a reduction in arrest, whether improvement in mental health symptoms, whether reduction in substance use. The jury really has long been in on permanent supportive housing, that there is no more cost-effective intervention and proven solution to address chronic homelessness than permanent supportive housing, which is what we're proposing for Burien. All of these data points, or all of these factoids, if you will, have studies that back them up that I'd be more than happy to share resources for anyone who's interested after during the breakout section or after our call tonight. We can move into the next slide. So we know homelessness is a regional problem, and we know Burien has its fair share of people experiencing homelessness. And while this program is going to need to be tied to King County's coordinated and regional response for connecting high needs people to housing, we are really very excited that we are going to be able to target people experiencing homelessness in Burien for this project, including 25 veterans experiencing homelessness in Burien to move into this project, which is really quite exciting. And then last slide. I am really proud of the work we do at DSC and find myself talking about it in sometimes highfalutin, nebulous ways. And I always like to leave the conversation with a slide of really putting a finer point on what we're talking about. We're talking about apartment buildings, nice new apartment buildings that will serve to be pillars of the community for many years. That previous slide actually was the building Andrea and Deborah referenced, Rainier House, which sits basically in middle between Hillman City and Columbia City in basically a very similar proximity to downtown Burien that we're proposing to develop. So really just want to make sure as we talk about the programming and the philosophy behind what we're doing, want to really highlight, we're talking about apartment buildings that will end the homelessness for our neighbors. So with that, I'd like to pass on to Sandra to talk a bit more about the brick and mortar itself.
Hi, I'm Sandra Nielsen. I am DESC's Director of Facilities and Property Development. I want to introduce you a little bit to Burien, and then we'll talk about other things related to site selection. DESC Burien is going to be a beautiful building designed by our partnership with SMR Architects. They have done several of our buildings, and this building will be no different. It's going to have 95 units. It's going to have some amenity spaces on the first floor, such as a reception desk, patient consult rooms, nursing and medical office, lounge, kitchen area, and places for people to be in a courtyard that will be limited to resident access only, so that folks can be outside and get fresh air and feel safe within that space. I just want to comment that in relation to property values, the construction costs for DESC Burien will approximately be between $19 and $20 million. And we're going to have a side of the facade that is going to have some art on it. So we really think that this beautiful building is really going to be very exciting in this area. We're also going to be doing some significant improvements to sidewalks and non-landscape areas that currently exist for this site. Why did we pick this site? We picked this site because it's a good place to live. It's a good place for our residents to have access to community transit and to other amenities. And the building that is there now is significantly aged. It needs substantial work, and the seller has some concerns that are leading to a desire to sell the site. Next slide, please. I wanted to show you a photo of what the inside of an apartment building looks like. We take energy efficiency at DESC very seriously, and this building will have a lot of energy efficiency standards and will provide green safe units for people with low VOC and not use of hazardous chemicals. I think I have one more slide. Next slide. Oh, video. I'd like to show you a video of our Hobson building. So you can see inside one of DESC spaces and hear Daniel Malone, our executive director, talk a little bit about the interior of our most recently opened project, Hobson.
We're really proud of Hobson Place, and we'd like to show you around. So let's start out front. Tenants will have their own keys, come and go as they please, and they'll enter through the front door here. At this front desk area will be staff available for all kinds of support 24/7. Coming into the rest of the lobby, you see typical amenities for apartment buildings, such as a place for your mail, elevator and stair entries, and lots of other space where we can the front door here. At this front desk area will be staff available for all kinds of support 24/7. Coming into the rest of the lobby, you see typical amenities for apartment buildings, such as a place for your mail, elevator and stair entries, and lots of other space where we can provide opportunities for people to participate in group activities, to have meals, to receive counseling, to see a nurse, to just take a load off, not have to be outside somewhere out on the streets. We happen to be in a time right now where we're not filling our lobbies with furniture for people. Eventually we will. We'll have furniture for people to gather together for dining, lounging, or for engaging in other kinds of social or therapeutic activities together. Here we have a quiet room. It's an amenity for staff to be able to be alone with their thoughts or their prayers or their activities that they need to engage in a more private manner. Here's our kitchen. We have some amount of meal service that we're able to provide to the tenants here. While of course they all have cooking facilities in their own apartments, we're able to help meet their nutritional needs through our meal service, and also just give us another opportunity for less formal interaction with people while we build relationships and find ways that we can be better involved in their lives. So we've got a whole team of staff here to help the tenants and run the operation. This is all led by the project manager, who's got an office here. Also have a team known as the clinical support specialists who really work with individual tenants on whatever it is that will help them maintain their housing and see what life might have in store for them. Here we are on the 6th floor looking at some of the apartments. You'll see it looks like a fairly conventional apartment building. One simple amenity we have in the apartments is a safety device connected to the stoves and ranges, where you've got to have a timer turned on in order for power to go to the stove and range, which also turns on the fan. If somebody chooses to open the window, then the heat is going to stop operating, so we're not wasting a lot of energy. We also are able to monitor water flow such that if a person is leaving the water running for extended periods of time in the shower or the sink, we'll get an alert about that, and we'll be able to make some kind of intervention that helps a person deal with what's going on without wasting water and energy. So we're taking this tour right before the furniture has arrived. When people move into these apartments, each unit will be furnished. There will be a bed, a dresser, a table and chairs, as well as a full array of amenities such as dishes, linens, towels, all of those kinds of important things that, of course, the folks that will be living here don't have their own supply of when they first move in. And these furnishings in the kitchens and the bathrooms come from so many wonderful volunteers who adopted each apartment to provide all of those items. Thank you so much.
I'm going to turn it over to the Deputy Director of Operations, Stephen Bullock, who's going to walk us through next steps for our breakout groups.
Thank you, Sandra. Hello, everyone. I'm really excited to be here tonight to share this information with you. I'd just like to remind you that this presentation is being recorded, and it also will be recorded when you go into your breakout sessions. I'm here tonight to help you transition to your breakout sessions and provide a little Zoom etiquette so it'll be easier for us all to communicate. So we would like our participants will automatically be assigned to 5 breakout rooms for discussions, questions, and feedback. So the breakout rooms that you'll be in, there'll be 5, and these rooms are for us to have discussions, you to ask questions, and for us to give you feedback. DE staff will be present in each room to answer questions and take down comments. So it will be myself and a facilitator in our group. And if you ask questions and we don't have time to get back to you, please put your email in, your name and your phone number, because it's important to us to get back to everyone who has questions, because we may not have enough time tonight. If you're calling in, you will be automatically moved into a breakout room. Please press *6 to mute and unmute yourself. If you, as part of the etiquette, when you press *, you can make sure that you're unmuted, and then our conversations won't run into each other. Please stay muted when you're not speaking. It's hard to know when to talk in a Zoom setting. To prevent confusion, you may click the raise hand button, which we've drawn raise hand button on there so you can see it. Click that raise hand button and a facilitator will call on you to speak. Type your question or your comment in the chat box and a facilitator will ask you to unmute, or wait until the last speaker has finished before you begin talking. Again, we're very excited to be with you tonight. You will shortly be automatically transitioned into your breakout group. Have a great conversation. Thank you.
I guess everybody probably got bounced back. So just for the basic wrap up here, thank you all for attending and for the questions and feedback and comments. Really appreciate it. We're, as I said, going to share the recordings with the city staff. And then we are going to take this round of questions and feedback and do our best to summarize the issues that have been brought up and share out information about that. And so you can see here the website link that you can go to, and that's where we will add new information as it comes available or as we get it ready. So that's the main thing. I'll just ask for a moment, anybody from the DESC team have anything you want to add here?
I will just mention that I did post the website in the chat box, so it's easier to copy and paste if that's something you'd like to go look at.
Oh, good. Thank you, Julie. Okay, and then, you know, back to Andrea and Deborah, who, you know, helped make sure we could do this meeting and promote it to businesses. Anything you all would like to say in the wrap up here?
This is Andrea again. You know, just thank you for the opportunity to, you know, bring more information and opportunities for discussion with the Burien business community. I think people already put it in the chat, but the presentation to City Council is April 5th. If anyone has any, you know, questions, please feel free to contact me as well. I'm happy to share information and feedback.
Great.
Yeah, and I just want to thank everyone for participating today, and I look forward to more constructive communication on this.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. I think that wraps us up then. Appreciate you spending your time with us, and you know, follow us, you know, at the website for new information that we'll post there. And otherwise, we'll be continuing to engage through the City of Burien's process that's been set up for this. So I think that's all. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.